movies we have just seen, we met different members of society with different status, background, nationalities, etc. To what extent are you multicultural? Very? To some extent? Not very? Not at all? Now let's examine who you have contact with on a day-to-day basis. Fill in the top row about yourself. Gender, religion, nationality, skin color, religious, secular, immigrant, native, and then fill in for each of the following: the teachers in my school, my friends at school, my greengrocer, my family doctor, my barber, hairdresser, my neighbors, the visitors to my house. Look at the answer you have written in the table. What have you learned about yourself? What can you learn about human nature? Most people are not aware that they mostly maintain contact with people like themselves. They think they are very multicultural, and in fact, the multicultural encounters we have are extremely limited.
We are delighted to have with us today Dr. Barry Van Driel, who is the president of the International Association for Intercultural Education, as well as senior staff at Anne Frank House. We're really pleased to have this opportunity to talk to you. Dr. Van Driel, some people say there's a problem with the terminology we use, multiculturalism or cultural diversity. What do you use and why?
I use the word diversity in general, where possible, because culture is such a slippery concept with literally hundreds of definitions. Also, many of the definitions of culture are rather static and also rather essentialist in nature. If I do use the word culture as all, I prefer the word intercultural when speaking especially of education, whether it's for educational processes or educational relationships or educational approaches. This is because the concept refers to dynamic processes of people from different backgrounds constantly interacting and constantly communicating.
Interesting. How has the phenomenon of multiculturalism and cultural diversity evolved over the past decade in various parts of the world?
In my view, the concepts mean different things in different places. The largest struggle in North America and Europe is an identity issue, I think. To what extent these societies define themselves or not as being multicultural in nature, versus having one dominant culture and seeing that as basically the essence of society.
Right, we discussed this in Unit 2, whether multiculturalism is a fact or a value, and if there is a ruling or dominant culture.
And the issue of religion has come into play as well in these discussions. In North America and Europe, a good part of the resistance to embracing multiculturalism is linked to a perceived threat to traditional national values and traditions, often connected to Christianity. All this at a time when the relevance of Christianity and traditional churches is being called into question.
Do you agree with Dr. Van Driel? Can you give examples?
So we understand that in North America and Europe, identity and religion are the main issues. About the rest of the world?
In Latin and South America, the concepts of multiculturalism and cultural diversity have been tied to efforts by indigenous populations to have their voices and needs heard in various arenas. This has led to demands for their cultures and histories to be respected, forming an oppositional movement to the dominant forces in society. In the educational realm, it implies equal access to educational institutions and educational processes. Therefore, the concept of equity becomes very important.
Do you know any examples of this between indigenous populations, natives, and dominant cultures? Please share with your group.
As you know, many of the students on this course come from the field of education. What, in your opinion, are the major educational challenges facing multicultural societies today?
The major challenge, in my view, is the populist backlash we're witnessing across the globe at the moment, and the attraction of people, both young and old, to simplistic reasoning that presses many emotional buttons.
Yes, we see this in a number of countries around the world, where there are populist political movements that use demagoguery and extreme nationalism to create an atmosphere of fear and victimhood.
Indeed, attempts by minorities to have their voices heard and to claim what we could say is a piece of the pie are seen as a threat and as a danger. Concerns, uncertainties, and fears among the majority are being exploited by populists at a time when societies are changing very rapidly. Modernization and globalization are hitting societies like a tidal wave, and too often minorities and refugees become the scapegoats. And we've seen this before. They are easy targets since they have little power. Such minorities symbolize what we might refer to as multiculturalism. Now, targeting minorities also helps create unity among the majority because the majority can identify a common enemy.
Yes, to have someone to blame for their misfortunes. We've seen this again and again through history. But as you say, today we live in a global society. How has technology and global mobility affected our attitudes towards the other?
Before Dr. Vandriel answers this question, what do you think? How has technology and global mobility affected our attitudes towards the other?
The world is ever more connected and interconnected. There is great potential to learn across boundaries due to technology and mobility. Technology allows us to pose a question or engage in a discussion with people from around the planet. We can hear different opinions that can broaden our perspectives and understanding of the world. This does happen, of course, but on too small a scale, and we are not using technology to its full advantage. Mobility would ideally allow us to engage in face-to-face conversations with people from all over the planet if we desire to do this. Again, this occurs too little. In fact, in many countries in the West, we see increasing residential and educational segregation. And online, we see that filter bubbles and echo chambers more or less only put us in touch with like-minded people.
Right, although it seems we are global and connected to the world, most of us are only connected to our own group. There are real dangers here when people with extreme racist ideas will easily find others like them on the net and will cultivate notions of separatism and nationalism.
Yes, I agree.
So with this in mind, Dr. Vandriel, are you optimistic about the future?
I sometimes, when thinking about optimism versus pessimism, the question you asked, I refer to the quote by Anne Frank, the most famous quote that gets used quite often, in which she says, "In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart." And I ask students to indicate whether they totally agree with that statement or totally disagree with that statement or somewhere in between. I think that gives us an interesting look at where people stand with respect to how they feel about humans and human emotions and human attitudes. I think I'm pessimistic at the macro level and optimistic at the micro level. I see many fascinating and inspiring initiatives at the micro level in all areas of life, and especially in the area of education where I work. Now, these initiatives make me smile and laugh, and make me realize what humanity is really capable of. I see caring people, people who go out of their way to help others who are different from themselves, people who sacrifice time and energy to do the right thing. There's so many unsung heroes out there, and that is humanity at its best.
What are your fears and concerns for the future?
At the macro level, I'm deeply concerned about what I see. I then realize that too many people still feel attracted to the ideologies and base instincts that have led to multiple wars and genocides in the past. We are forgetting the lessons of the past. And so many polls and studies show exactly that. Those lessons, however, teach us to be vigilant when it comes to human rights, to respect each other, to withhold judgment, to give others the benefit of the doubt, and to accept that people are different. The fact that so many countries have nuclear weapons also looms, in my opinion, as a sword of Damocles in the long term. We forget about this reality too often.
Yes, it's very worrying.
Exactly. I worry about the carelessness and greed that is slowly destroying the only planet we know. I do not see, to be honest, the resolve to truly tackle this problem, which I feel is the major problem of our time. With respect to human relations, I think we could do much better. For instance, by having people in schools learn about conflict resolution the moment they start school and continue throughout their school careers. I think if everybody would graduate having taken conflict resolution courses throughout their school career and becoming a conflict resolution expert, that this would truly make a difference.
So maybe our next course should be in conflict resolution. Dr. Barry Vandriel, thank you so much for joining us.
Now let's change our identities
and see how people relate to us. Please go into the market in Unit 7 on the island and try out the 2 simulations.